Anyway, this is the third part of the Back to the Future retro review show here on the Wayne Baxter Experience. Back to the Future Part 3.
Yeah.
It picks up directly after, of course, like the second one picks up from where the first one left off. Picks up where they're at the clock tower. The lightning bolt is shown again. Marty comes up to Doc, tells him he's back from the future.
Of course, 1955. They're still stuck in 1955.
Yeah.
Due to the DeLorean.
But anyway, they took Marty takes Doc back to his house, and there Marty's drying off the letter and taking a bunch of resting on the couch while Doc's resting from passing out.
Yeah.
So and show the sign of the times and everything. They're showing the TV and the Howdy Doody show comes on.
Oh.
And Doc wakes up, talks on his little microphone and little reel-to-reel record reel and everything, recording his voice to talk about the time experiment. So and then he starts like saying, I had this vision that Marty said he had come back to the future, and he turns around and there's Marty, scared, flipped and everything. And they're Marty trying to get Doc out of the bathroom because Doc's refusing that this is happening. And then Doc, Marty tells him that he's sent him a letter. So they read the letter, and you basically, you see Marty in the background and everything, looking at some stuff that was showcased in the original Back to the Future, like the burnt card from the model kit that Doc had done. And then Doc's reading the letter and everything, telling him that he's been living happily in the last 6 months in the year 1885, and that he's a blacksmith in the year 1885. And then he tells them that he had buried the DeLorean in a cave, in an old mine and everything. So they go and dig it out and everything, and realize that it's been sitting there for about 70 years. So at one point and everything, in 1955, there had to been at least 3 or 4 DeLoreans. The one old Biff had drove into, the one that Marty from the original film had, the one that flying in, and the one that was in the cave. So at one time, that's probably the reason.
Machines in the same.
So that's probably why that's a specific point in the time.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of like I guess you could say a focal point.
Yeah.
Just all the time machines, all the people that operate the time machine, one spot.
Yeah. We're reading too much in this.
Probably.
Yeah. Anyway, so they get the DeLorean out of the cave, and then Marty goes to get Doc's little dog and everything, Copernicus, and Marty picks him up from a gravesite that happened to say Emmett Brown, and Marty's yelling for Doc and everything, and they take a look and they find out that Emmett Brown's name, Doc Brown's name, is on this tombstone. And it was like 1 week after he wrote the letters, the date. So what happens is that they go into the library and everything, and they try to look at the history of Hill Valley, and they find a picture of Doc next to the clock tower before the clock itself was erected onto the building itself. So Marty is now convinced that he has to go back, and he decides, once he fixes the DeLorean and everything, I'm going to go back to 1885 and save you. So they go ahead and they get into this.
If I'm not mistaken, he tells Doc Brown that he's going to go back to 1985 instead of 1885. Tells him he's not going to mess with it.
Well, that's what Doc Brown in the letter wanted him to do.
Yeah.
So, but the Doc Brown in 1955 and everything, I guess, due to self-preservation, he's like agreeing with Marty to go back. So
it was the point in time he always wanted to see. The old
West, So what happened was they go to this drive-in, and they end up, Marty gets in there and he's wearing this khaki old Western. That's the 1955 movie's interpretation of what a cowboy's supposed to look like. But he decides not to wear the boots because they're too tight, so he keeps on his old Nikes.
Yeah.
And so they end up he goes back into time and everything. He's like, well, if I crash into those pictures of Indians, You're not thinking fourth dimensionally.
Yeah.
They won't even be there. So he tells them about a cave that's over about a mile away. So Marty gets in the DeLorean. Doc tells him good luck, and then he shoots a gun up in the air, and Marty goes off to accelerate to 88 miles per hour. And what happens? He goes through the picture of Indians.
Yeah, just arrive in a full stampede of Indians on their horses,
So he's being chased by Indians in the DeLorean. Obviously, I think the Indians would probably in real life be more scared of seeing something shoot out of nowhere.
You would think so, but I guess they just weren't surprised.
Yeah. So he ends up getting chased, and he thinks he goes down this hill, and he sees the cave. He backs up, gets out after the Indians, right away, and then he gets up, looks over the hill, and then he notices the cavalry. So while he's waiting for them to go past and everything, he turns around, goes back to the DeLorean, and smells something, and he finds out he's ripped the fuel line. Thank you. I think so. But what happened was he ended up there we go. He ends up yeah. So all of a sudden a bear in the cave and everything scares him off. He starts running away, and he falls down this hill and everything, and he cracks his head on a wooden post and everything, and then he gets smacked in the face and everything. Somebody's trying to wake him up, and the camera pans up, and it's Michael J. Fox as one of his ancestors.
Great grandfather.
Yeah, or great great grandfather.
Yeah, I think it might have been.
Hey, Seamus
Well,
McFly.
I think it was the original just great grandfather.
Yeah.
I guess his grandfather was the baby that he comes to meet as he takes up shelter with Seamus McFly.
I think so. That I would think it said his great grandfather. So,
It may be.
so, but if you guys look it up, you know what it is. Let us know in the comments below.
There you go.
And then he wakes up, and he's in the same predicament again. He's in the bed, and he's like, wakes up, and he's like, the McFly farm, and he's like, you're my mom, you're my. And it's Leah Thompson playing,
His great
and obviously the excuse that the Gales, they wanted to use Leah Thompson in the movie, and the excuse is that the McFlys are attracted to a certain type of woman, and they have to look a certain way or something,
There you go.
But so they're sitting there, and he's holding his grandfather, great grandfather, and everything. He's like, so you're the first McFly born in America, and you peed on me, which we've all had that happen plenty of times.
You got kids. I've never been around kids.
You've had piss on you.
Or worse.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, a lot worse. But so he gets to Seamus gives him a new hat and tells him which way to go, follow the tracks to town and everything. So Marty gets to town wearing a silly looking hat.
Not only a silly looking hat, he looks silly to begin with.
Yeah, with the tassels and everything.
Tassels all over his shirt, his button up, his blue and cream colored
maroon
pants.
Yeah.
And a pair of Nikes.
Yeah. So he finally gets to at the end of the railroad tracks to the train station, and he looks over and goes, kind of does a whistle and everything, in amazement and everything, knowing that which was it was a really nice set that they had built and everything for this town and everything, for the Hill Valley of 1885 and everything. At the time, you see
looked like something you'd find in a western.
It was
very well researched. You can tell they took their time.
Yeah. And you can see a little Easter eggs and everything. The Statler Brothers horse rentals and everything, because in 1985, the Statler Brothers had a car dealership, and certain, DJ Jones and everything had manures and everything. And
well, I think those Easter eggs are just much of a staple in the whole franchise.
Yeah.
Whether it be going back to 1955, being in 1985, or even going to 2015, you just see family businesses that were passed down. Or, the same. That was really cool to see.
Yeah.
Especially something you don't see in America nowadays. You don't see a lot of so and so and son. Passed down. It's a lot of Tire Express and
corporate run stuff.
Oh yeah.
So Marty gets over there and he sees that the clock tower has not been completed yet at the courthouse, and he kind of shrugs it like, yeah. And he sees that, goes to the marshal's office and sees that he's gone for a hanging.
Yeah.
So some would say gone for fishing. He's gone for a hanging. So he goes into this saloon, which is a substitute for Lou's Cafe and for Cafe 80, and he basically almost
It's very reminiscent of anytime he walks into the
an establishment,
cafe, whatever that setting.
Yeah.
Just the social situation seems to be the same. Him being awkward in that time period causes him some friction with locals or.
I mean, and you also see, and they're no longer living and everything, but in his little round table and everything, he saw a bunch of sidekicks and everything. Budford, a few other gentlemen, I can't recall their names and everything, but when you watch it and everything, you see these gentlemen.
Staples in the Wild West.
Yes, a lot of old Wild West movies and everything. They were considered the sidekicks and everything.
Especially that one fella. He's got probably one of the most memorable voices.
Oh yeah, and he did a lot of Hubble Bubble.
Oh yeah. He also did that dog in Five Goes West.
Yeah. So it said
that voice just screams the Old West.
Yeah, it does. But it was
Put it in your mouth. Okay.
But it was really interesting to see how Robert Zemeckis and Bob Gale really wanted to capture the Old West. At that time, a lot of westerns were not being made. I mean, the only western I can remember that came out before was maybe Young Guns and Young Guns 2.
Well, a lot of westerns they had that just long run.
Yeah.
The John Wayne era, into the Clint Eastwood era.
Yeah.
Just an extremely long run. It had gotten to where you see that transition where your dad's watching his shows and you're watching your shows.
Yeah, and seeing a lot of the Texas two-step where an actor would go around a corner and everything, and then there'd be another actor that's on the horse, or vice versa. That's a classic movie trick and everything. A little trick and everything. Texas two-step. Look it up. Really, it's a technique that still kind of gets used to today. Yeah, but I had to say they did great details and everything when it comes to the Old West. So Marty's in there in the saloon and everything. He's asking about Doc, and then all of a sudden he hears, "Hey, McFly," and he turns around and says, "Oh, you ain't Seamus McFly," and it's Buford Bad Dog Tannen. Yeah. So you actually see a small glimpse of him in part 2 when they're talking about the history of the Tannen family at the Brooks Tannen Museum in part 2 in 1985A. So always keep your eye open for that Easter egg when you're watching part 2. But anyway, the same situation's going right and everything. They're wondering what's the deal with this little guy and everything that's dressed up like a Chinaman, basically what they call him. They're talking about his Nikes and everything. They're calling it EKOs, that engine talk.
Yeah.
And they're making fun of his pearly whites because, back in those days, real cowboys didn't care about what their looks looked like. Honestly. And so Barney makes the mistake and says, "You're Mad Dog Tannen." And everybody scatters the room in classic Western style and everything when somebody insults another person. I mean, the whole room just clears and hides. And the Mad Dog Tannen's like, "Nobody calls me Mad Dog." And then he pulls out his gun and starts telling him to dance. So he's shooting his guns at his feet and everything. And Marty's jumping around. And next thing you know, he's
pulling the moonwalk.
Yeah, he's doing a whole Michael Jackson moonwalk thing.
Which, it's one of those situations where it shows you the time he's from relative to the time that he's in.
Yeah.
Which is really cool about the whole franchise.
Yeah, it definitely defines the 80s and everything, what it was to live in the 80s and the cultural icons and cultural happenings that were going on at that time. And this was 1990 when it came out, so the 80s were over. And this movie, in some way, was kind of giving its final little exclamation mark onto the 80s. Yeah. And it's a way of saying goodbye.
Well, the whole trilogy was kind of built in the 80s.
Yeah.
I think it was just more of an homage to how much they accomplished in that time.
Yeah. But anyway, Marty does a spin, jumps up, and spit comes. The spit buckets and everything they would have back for tobacco.
The classic, loose floorboard.
Yeah.
It's a slapstick gag that you find in a lot of movies, you know, even cartoons.
Yeah.
You know. But yeah, flicks that spittoon right up on top of Buford Cannon.
Yeah. And the thing is that back in those days, cowboy didn't mind getting cow crap or dog or
Yeah.
horse crap on him or anything like that. That was part of the job. But when it comes to spit and everything, that was a big insult.
Well, not only that, I mean, it's the consistency.
Yeah.
You know, if you're lucky, you know, the cow crap, the horse crap is, you know, dry. It reaches that almost dirt consistency.
Yeah.
Wipe it off. You know?
Yeah.
Getting tobacco spit on you, that's a whole nother action
Yeah.
right there. That's a different breed of horse.
Yeah. And that's one thing I could never do is tobacco.
I
Chewing tobacco.
used to. It's kind of like having thin motor wall.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I never could do that. Smoking was the biggest problem I ever had in my life. But so Cannon goes on a rant and chases after him. Marty does the classic grabbing the chandeliers and flying up to the door. So he's getting chased. He runs out and he's getting chased. So Biff and his gang jumps on the horses and starts chasing after him. And I have to say, Thomas F. Wilson learned really well how to be an outlaw cowboy and everything. When it comes to throwing that lasso and everything, he learned really well how to do all that.
I think that was one of the coolest parts about part 3 was the fact that it changed it up. I mean, you look at the previous 2 films, you see the chase scene. You know, Marty always gets the better of Biff. You know, if this is Biff's ancestor, I guess. You know, back then he had a few more IQ points.
Yeah.
You know, just
he had nothing to keep him held back either.
There you go. But yeah, he actually catches Marty.
Yeah.
Strings him up.
And they basically he goes, "This is new courthouse. High time we have a hanging."
Yeah.
And in the scene where Marty's getting hung, Michael J. Fox is actually getting hung. Yeah. And in his book, in his memoirs and everything that he wrote a few years back, he actually passed out while he was being hung. You know, he actually blacks out and everything. So he ends up out of nowhere. You see this figure walking. You see his feet, and then you see him fixing this makeshift or modified
lever action Winchester that was modified by a scope, makeshift scope, which they didn't have scopes back then. You know, your eyesight was about as good with shooting as you were going to get.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you couldn't see, you just couldn't see. You were going to eat that night.
Yeah. So Doc, it ends up being Doc. He shoots a really good shot and everything at the rope and everything, releasing Marty.
Which is another classic staple of the westerns. You know, everybody's had that, you know, movie moment in a western where they split the rope, and you know, whoever drops down escapes.
Yeah.
You know.
So and then he ends up pointing it towards Tannen and everything. He says, "I've shot a flea alpha dog's back in 500 yards, Tannen, and it's aiming at your head." And then he ends up telling him.
Which has to be one of the best moments for Doc.
Yeah.
It makes him look like a real tough guy. You know, he's not the Doc that faints at the sight of Marty not being.
Yeah. So, but he ended up. They give the explanation like, you know, you owe me $70, $80.
Shoot the horse wrong.
Yeah.
I think it was $75. Shoot the horse wrong. The horse threw a shoe. Tannen shot the horse.
He got thrown from it, and now he ended up throwing
a bottle of whiskey.
Yep.
Yeah.
Kentucky Black Eye.
There you go.
Yeah.
Put hair on your chest.
Yeah.
And your knuckles.
And anywhere else that's going to become.
There you go. Before you know it, you'll be a Yeti walking around your house.
How's Zach doing, by the way?
There you go. We owe him a phone call.
Yes, we do. He's like, talking about me.
There you go.
Anyway, Marty notices that it's Doc, and then Cannon tells him, "You better watch it, or one of these days you're going to get a bullet behind your back." So him and his boys ride off.
Which you find out when they research before going back to the Old West, that's actually how Tannen killed Doc Brown.
Yeah.
Shot him in the back at a hootenanny.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then he looks at Marty and goes, "Marty, I told you to go Pacific right to 1985." And then, but he embraces Marty and saying that he's glad to see him and everything. And then he goes and he tells Doc what happened and everything. And they end up, Doc's like, "Well, we better hurry up and get the hell out of here." And he's asking, "Who's Clara?" I didn't know, he's like, "I don't know who that is," because it's a few days before he meets this Clara. So he's like going to, like, "Well, we better hurry up and get out of here and everything. And it's impossible for me to fall in love and everything. Doc doesn't believe in that romantic nonsense at love at first sight. So what happens is that, you know, Doc's got this big machine in his barn and everything where he lives and everything, and he, you know, it's making something.
Ice maker.
Yeah, it ends up being an ice maker. It blows this big old steam.
That's kind of interesting. The fact that this version of Doc was a completely different version from the previous two.
Yeah. So we talked about the ice machine.
Yeah.
And it comes out, and it's kind of like a brownish type of color. Ice does.
You gotta realize they didn't really have filtered water back then.
Yeah.
The fact that there was water, you were lucky.
Yeah. But the mayor comes in.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is, here's a little side note and everything. The mayor of Hill Valley back in 1885, the producers actually wanted to get Ronald Reagan to play the mayor, because Ronald Reagan was considered about going back into acting for a small time after he got out of office. Unfortunately, the time that it was shooting and everything, schedules couldn't come to fruition. But that would have been awesome if Ronald Reagan was able to, come out of acting and play the mayor of 1885 for a small part. Because again, Bob, this was one of Ronald Reagan's favorite films, was Back to the Future, as we stated before. And then, but unfortunately, I think at that time the Alzheimer's is starting to get bad and everything. It wasn't known yet, but I think it was at the beginning stages for the late president. But so the mayor tells Doc that he needs to meet this woman named Clara Clayton.
Yeah.
And so
new school teacher.
Yeah. So, but then Doc's like, well, we don't have to. Just go ahead and get the door and get out of here. And then Marty informs Doc that.
Yeah, that's the one he falls in love with.
Yeah, Marty informs him that the DeLorean's out of gas. The gas line busted. So they're like, how are we going to get this going and everything? So they tried to push it with a train full of wagon horses and everything, and they tried to figure out a lot of stuff, and then all of a sudden they realize that maybe there's a way to push it up to 88 miles per hour, and then they hear the train and they go and they take a look and everything. They talk to the train engineer and they're like, if you get the boilers hotter than the fires of hell, damnation and everything, you could possibly get it up to at least 90. So Doc ends up coming up with an idea. Then they take a look at these train tracks and everything. They're like, look, we could take this train spot and everything, long train rail, and take them with DeLorean and push it that way. So what happened? This is a long stretch of railroad track that's not being used. So, and then they notice, that Clayton Ravine here on the map is called Short Ass Ravine. That must be the old Indian name for it.
Yeah.
Not getting the connection. So while they're looking at the map and everything, also look at the foreground and the background and everything. You'll see Clara in a purple dress standing there waiting for Doc to come meet her and everything, which it never happened. And then Marty's like, according to this bridge or this map, this bridge is incomplete. So they go there and they see that the bridge is incomplete.
Yeah.
Marty's like, well, stretch that idea. We can't wait around a year for this thing. It's like, again, Doc's like, you're not thinking fourth dimensionally. You'll be there when we get there. So, and then they see that someone screaming, and then a woman in a wagon train, a runaway wagon train, with the horses are spooked. And, she's trying to control the horses, and then Doc and Marty jump on the horses and everything.
A great action scene in the Back to the Future Part 3. It's another classic scene you'll see from, most Westerns. The fact that, some women's horses get spooked. Running towards a ravine or something. And you see the heroes save her, which the way they did it, very reminiscent of Wild Western movie, which, even for the movie that it is, it being a time travel movie, I think it stands up to.
I mean, this movie is probably one of the best Westerns made in the 90s. As I said, there wasn't that many made in the 90s, but I mean, I'd say it goes up there next to Unforgiven, which is one of the best Westerns ever made. But what happened was he he grabs her and gets her off the wagon before it crashes off into the ravine, which is the ravine ends up eventually supposed to be named after her in honor of her.
Well, they come to find out that it's an old urban legend, that turns out to be real. All the kids at the school had a teacher that wanted to throw in Clayton's ravine because they heard a story that a school teacher died in Clayton's ravine running off.
Yeah, it's like that was like 100 years ago, and he's like 100 years. That's this year. But Doc ends up falling for her and everything. When after he catches her, he sees her. They look into each other's eyes, and she falls in love. So, Doc then realizes like, oh my God, I've made it completely endangered the timeline and everything. And he's like, I wish I'd never created the time machine.
Which he'd said before, but
Yeah. So they're trying to get things set up and planned and everything, and they go to this little shindig where the the celebration of the courthouse tower and everything. They're just happy to actually be there at that specific moment in time and everything at their town's history. And they're like, too bad I didn't bring my camera. And they're like, they realize they're taking photos and everything. Dog's like, too bad we can't show it to anybody. And Dog's like, this smile, Dog. And as my daughter hands it up again. I think she gets more views than anybody.
the third one that decided to poke his head out.
Yeah, but
what do they call it nowadays? Photo bombing.
Yeah,
there you go.
photo bomb. Yeah, my kids are real good at that.
There you go.
But so they go and they're celebrating the town and everything. It's a town party and everything. And Marty's eating the pizza, or eating a little pie and everything, and he's talking to his ancestors again. Seamus and Seamus' wife. The festival and everything's going on for the clock tower. They're looking around. They're just amazed by what they're seeing, this historical moment of their town. And they're like, well, too bad, I didn't bring my camera. And they're like, and then they see somebody, taking old photo shots of people standing in front of the clock tower. And they're kind of look at each other, and Doc's like, too bad we can't show anybody. He's just like, just smile, Doc. And then, people are dancing and stuff like that. And, Marty's watching, this guy selling their old Colt Peacemaker.
Yeah, the old Colt Peacemaker.
Yeah, and, yep. So and he's like, hey, Doc, check this out and everything. Doc's, kind of looking there for a moment, and then he kind of looks around and he sees Clara and everything, and he's smiling at her and everything. Obviously, he's in love.
Oh, yeah.
And they come to walk and talk and everything, him and Clara.
He was sold by the time he seen Saber from the camera.
Yeah. So he ends up. It's my turn to feed a baby now.
There you go.
Even though this baby's like 4, almost, right? Anyway, we end up. He's kind of stumbling on his words a little bit, and he's like, "Would you like to? Would you?" And she goes, "Yes, I would love to dance." And so they start dancing and everything. And the salesman's trying to get Marty to buy a gun, and Marty's like, "Hey, Doc, check this out." And he notices Doc dancing, and he's shocked because he didn't know that his friend could do that.
He went through the whole thing of he wasn't going to go there.
Yeah.
But it was a very interesting scene. We brought up in the second part of the review for part 2 the arcade game that he sees in the antique shop. You see basically the same setup.
Yeah. In the cafe.
In the cafe, but you see basically the same setup for the Colt testing stand, which was a staple in the Old West.
So he's like, Sonny boy, you want to take a look? You want to try it out? And he's like, I'm not afraid of anything. He says, well, come here. And then Marty tries to take a shot. He kind of, it slips, and goes up in the air. And he's like, can I try that again? The guy's laughing, saying, yeah, sure. And he starts, shooting at the, shooting at the targets and everything. And back in those days, there were old wooden targets that go up and down and have little metal hearts and everything that indicate, that twirl around and they indicate they've been hit.
I think most people have seen, those carnival. It's very reminiscent of an old carnival game. You see the old pellet gun. You get up there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very much like that.
And he's like, the salesman's like really shocked and everything.
Yeah.
He looks at him, he's like, tell me one thing. Where did you learn to shoot like that? And he's like, 7-Eleven.
Yeah.
So he just walks away. And then while Doc and Clara are dancing, they're enjoying themselves and everything. And then, Cannon enters the the area and everything. And then while he's walking
Of
into the
course,
saloon,
Strickland is the sheriff.
Yeah.
Strickland's ancestor is.
Yeah.
I
and
believe actually Strickland is the young boy.
no, it's Strickland is that was his grandfather.
That was his grandfather?
Yes.
Yeah.
So what happens was, they go, Biff and his gang's about to go into a saloon and everything, and they just happen to notice Doc dancing.
Yep.
And Buford takes his gun after all the guns were taken by the marshal and everything. Takes this little bitty hidden gun that was hiding in his hat, Dillinger, yeah. And he says, "Very careful, Buford. You only get one shot. All I need is one." And then
He mentions he's going to bury it in his back.
yeah. So while him and Clara are dancing and everything, Tanner sneaks up behind him and points the gun to his back. And he says something about along the lines like, the last time I shot a guy with this gun, it took him 3 whole days.
3 whole days to die.
So, which coincides with the date that Doc's tombstone says. But they're arguing and everything, and she tells Emmett that she'll dance with him as long as she is left alone. And then Buford's dancing with her and everything,
See
being real rough.
Biff got his way with women.
Yeah.
And
then Doc's like telling him, "Damn you, Tannen!" And Buford's about to raise his gun and point at him. Marty takes a pie and flings it. Now, early in the scene and everything, earlier on in that scene and everything, Marty's talking to his ancestors again, and he sees the frisbee pie plate, and it says frisbee on it and everything. He tells them, "Wow, frisbee, far out," and they're like, "It was right in front of him. What are you talking about?" But
another joke on the language of the time, the slang at the time.
Yeah.
I mean, in the original, Marty's wearing a kind of what they referred to as a sailor's vest.
Yeah, they thought it was like a life preserver and everything.
Yeah,
It's actually it was just a regular.
He mentioned to
thick
the
coat.
Doc Brown of 1955, something was heavy.
Yeah. Wow, that was heavy.
Yeah. Oh, there's a disturbance in the gravity, But
why is everything so heavy? It's a disturbance in the future with the Earth's gravitational pull. But anyway, he throws the pie plate and everything at Buford, and it hits the Dillinger and everything, and knocks the top of it off after it shoots.
I think it just takes it out of his hand.
Really? It looked like it. It looked like it broke it, but he like, "Lighten up, jerk!" And Buford's like, and he looks at his posse and everything, and they're like, "We've never heard that word before." And he goes, "Mighty strong words, runt." So and then the marshal comes in and everything. He's like, "Anybody causes any commotion, or everything gets 30 days in the hole." And they're like, "This is between me and Eastwood." So.
Clint Eastwood, by the way, the name Marty McFly goes under in the 1885.
Yeah, so he can, not cause confusion and everything.
As well as a kind of a nod towards the Western era of film.
Another thing about like the Calvin Klein thing, Marty's never having to be himself. He has to be someone else in order to fit in. Really? And that was a stinker too. But so. Marty's challenge, basically Buford's challenging him and everything. Says, "I'll meet you here at 12 o'clock, naked high noon. I do my killing after breakfast,
Well, I think the original time was he wanted to meet him there at like sunup or something
Yeah.
like that. He liked to do his killing before breakfast.
Yeah.
And then that was when Marty McFly, says, "Well, I'll meet you here at high noon. I like to do my killing after breakfast."
Yeah. So, but Doc's like, "No. And then, they get back, once the commotion's all done, the marshal scares everybody off and everything. Buford goes, 'Let's go, everybody. Let's see sissies have their party.' And he looks like he's about to cry.
The high-pitched voice didn't help him.
Yeah.
Kind of expecting him, to pull at his eyes a little bit. Just,
That would have been an added bonus to it.
"I'm going back home to my horse."
So Doc's like, "Marty, what are you doing?" He's like, "Dude, we're going to be back to the future tomorrow. We're going to go back to the future." Say, "But theoretically, what if the train's late,
Yeah.
So, but, and then all of a sudden everybody's like shaking his hand and everything, shaking Marty's hand. And then the guy from the Colt salesman gives him this Colt Peacemaker, which nowadays is what? Priceless, yeah. I mean, I don't know if I don't know if there's that many still around.
The infamy, from that time period.
Yeah. So
just the infamy of you hear Colt Peacemaker, you think the Wild West.
Yeah.
It is truly.
It it's a beautiful practice gun.
Very well made.
Yeah,
Very well made.
especially for that time.
Oh yeah. It was innovative.
Yeah, but and plus the shape of it and everything made it fit the holsters real good, and you could grab it like the way you can grab it and everything.
I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Samuel Cole actually made the holster just for the Feastman, which I think just really helped him sell the weapon better because a holster was pretty much one size fits all.
Yeah.
You got what you got.
Yeah, and it was even easier for left-handed people too. But I see spiders.
But anyway, Doc Brown basically tells Clara that the two of them can't be, intact.
Well, that was a little bit later, I believe, because they went off to look at her telescope after he fixed it.
Yeah.
And they fell in love right that moment, got his first kiss, and that was Christopher Lloyd's first on-screen kiss.
Yeah.
And what happened was, of course, they showed a shooting star, the romantic Western scene of the makeout scene. Obviously, what happened to Doc. Because the next morning and everything, Marty's waking up and they're doing what they did is that they did a little reminiscent of the opening of Back to the Future Part 1, where Doc did all this stuff that started up his breakfast and everything.
Yeah.
This little thing. And the thing was, that scene was set up by H.G. Wells' ancestor, his great-great-grandson, who wrote The Time Machine, H.G. Wells, who wrote one of the best typical time machine or time traveling stories. But his great-great-grandson, I believe it was, that helped develop that scene. And what happened was Marty wakes up, and of course, he's wearing his long johns and everything, flap halfway open. And he's like putting the gun on, and he's doing the whole De Niro taxi thing. Hey, you talking to me?
Yeah.
Are you talking to me? And then he goes into his Clint Eastwood Dirty Harry moment. He's like, well, go ahead, make my day. And he's posing with the gun and everything. This is him living one of his life dreams of being a cowboy. Like anybody, everybody wants to be a cowboy.
Every kid at some age,
even if they've never seen a Western, my kids, my youngest son, Phoenix, he was going around one night in the store, while I was on vacation and everything. He was wearing a cowboy hat, going, "I'm the Lone Ranger," going and talking to everybody,
And he was talking about the TV show, not the movie, right?
Honestly, this was way before all that. He has never seen the Lone Ranger at all before at that time. The movie was the first time he saw anything the Lone Ranger. And it's just the mystique of the cowboys, the outlaws, the Indians.
I think it's just
Yeah.
simpler time.
But I have to say that it was it was probably one of my favorite moments and everything.
It was a good moment. I would say it wasn't as good as some of the later scenes. The comical scene, of course, when Doc gets drunk.
Yeah. But when Marty's walking around, he's dressed up, and everybody's going, good
luck, Eastwood.
Yeah, good luck, Mr. Eastwood, and everything. And he keeps having this one guy come around measuring his clothes.
The Undertaker.
Yeah.
Another pivotal person in a Western.
Yeah. So what he ends up seeing Doc and off in the distance. He walks up to him and everything, and Doc's smelling this little flower and everything. It was part of Claire's arrangement on her dress and everything. Obviously, what Doc was doing the night before, and because he was walking around with a smile on his face.
He had that glow.
Yeah. So anyway, Doc's like, well, why are you wearing those guns and everything? Don't worry. Tomorrow we're going to go back to the future and everything. But you hear what that son of a bitch Tana called me. He's like, Marty, you can't keep getting all put up and everything when someone calls you something in the future and everything. That's what happens. And he accidentally slips about the accident.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, what happens to me in my future? He says, I can't tell you. It's going to disrupt the time barrier again.
It's something that his girlfriend Jennifer had seen.
Yeah.
That Christopher Lloyd's character, Doc Brown, knew about, but never told Marty about.
Yeah. So what happened though is that they're getting everything ready for the next day and everything to get the DeLorean hooked up on the tracks. And he tells Marty that he's not going back to the future with him, that he's in love with Clara and he wants to stay with her. And Marty convinces him, like, this is the wrong thing.
Yeah.
You got to do what need to do in your brain, up here and everything, not here. And,
Basically tells him, that's the timeline he dies in.
yeah. So Doc goes and, puts the DeLorean on the tracks and agrees with Marty. And he goes to tell Clara that he cannot be with her no more, that he has to go. He admits to her that he is from the future.
Yeah.
And obviously she doesn't believe him and everything.
To her, it's absurd.
Yeah. And, she thinks that, he was taking advantage of her because they both were fans of Jules Verne.
Oh, yeah.
And that was one of Doc's idols and everything to end up coming up to being a scientist was Jules Verne's writing. Like a lot of scientists, But so she, gets mad at him, throws him out, and then Doc walks into the saloon.
Yeah.
Depressed and everything. So he's telling them everything about the future and everything like that.
To a barbed wire salesman.
Yeah. And so Marty wakes up, realizes Doc's not there, and he starts looking at the photograph because earlier, while they were talking, they find a tombstone.
Yeah.
And the tombstone doesn't have a name on it yet.
It was the photograph he brought from the future.
From 1955, yeah.
1955 when he did the research.
Yeah.
The tombstone that once had Emmett Brown's name on it
was disappearing.
But
the tombstone was still there.
Yeah.
So it's like he's like, Marty, if you keep this up and everything, your name's gonna probably end up on this tombstone.
Yeah.
So Marty finally, gets back to town and finds Doc in the saloon. Still holding that drink, and everybody's kind of mocking him and making fun of him, telling him, and Doc's giving all this future information, saying that people don't run to be scared, they run for recreation and fun. And then all of a sudden, Marty gets up to Doc and everything, and he's like, Doc, you got to come back with me. Say remnants from the original film, he's like, Back to the Future. And Doc's like, you're right. He goes, gentlemen, my friend and I have to catch a train.
Yeah.
And they're like, here too, you blacksmith, into the future. And then what does Doc do?
After one shot.
Yep. He says, to the future, passes right out like that, crashes.
Ultra lightweight, takes a shot, throws it back, pauses for a moment, flat on his face.
Yeah, right. Hits him. It does a classic falling on the table, and the table flips over and everything. The top flips over. The rest of it stays down pretty well on the.
I don't know why they nail their table to the floor, but not the tabletop to the table.
Yeah. So, and they're like, how many drinks did you have? Just one? He's like, just one?
Yeah.
First, I felt like I can't hold his liquor. Then all of a sudden, he's like trying to wake him up, and then the
bartender on the counter.
And then he starts the clock starts ringing and everything. He's like, 12 minutes. Why do we have to cut these things so damn close? Noticing that it happened a lot in the previous films. Like, they're always at that split second where they get to what they need to get to, and then all of a sudden, Tannen,
rides into town.
Yeah, and then when they like, how are we gonna wake him up? He's like, the bartender's like, let's make some wake up juice.
Yeah.
And it's like every hot item that you possibly can.
Radish, there's hot sauce in there. I think you put everything in there but the kitchen sink.
Just about. And I remember when I like that saying that says, when he comes through, he's gonna be as sober as a priest on Sunday.
Oh yeah.
So, and then Tannen, they give it to him, they put it in his mouth. He's like, just back up. And then he, they pour it in his mouth and everything. Next, his eyes pops up. He's running out and like screaming and dumps his head in the horse truffle. And then, they pick him up and he's still out and everything. It's like, oh, that's just a reaction.
Yeah.
It took a few minutes for him to clear up his head. So they bring him back in. Tannen then show up.
And it's a classic calling out scene at that point.
Yeah.
Tannen rushes into town and he's calling out.
It's not 12 o'clock.
Marty
Nope, I'm on watch.
Eastwood, He's hollering for him. Of course, the whole time Marty's just trying to kill time. That way he can, make it out of here with Doc.
But I like it when he's like, Tannen is starting to count down and everything.
Oh, yeah.
And then he pauses and everything, and he's like, 7! And then all of a sudden he finally hits 10 and everything. He says, you hear me what? I said 10, you gutless yellow belly fly finger. And then Marty, he's kind of looking at Seamus, his ancestor, who shows up a little bit, saying that they're asking Seamus, well, what are you doing here? It's like, I don't know, it feels like my future depends on it. So, after somebody hands Marty a gun, he's like, I have one. And then after Tannen hits 10 and everything, he looks up at Seamus, and he kind of looks over and everything. He goes, and looks back at everybody and goes, he's an asshole. And I don't care what he says, and I don't care what anybody else says.
That was after there was a scuffle in the saloon. They were trying to get him out of there, wasn't
No, that was already, that I think it already happened and everything. They were just trying to wake Doc up the whole time.
they? Right.
And what happened was that Doc finally pops up and everything, and he's asking, "Where's the back door?" And he's like, "In the back."
Yeah.
So they sneak out around the back, and then one of Tannen's guys notices him. Marty and them get caught in the alley, and bullets flying and everything. And then Marty runs into this room where he crashes into an old
Cast iron stove.
yeah, and then the front of the door drops off. Now, pay mind to this. They get Doc and everything. They got him captured, and then what happens was that they start giving him a countdown and everything, saying that
Turns into a classic hostage situation.
Yeah.
Eastwood don't come out and fight Tannen. They're gonna shoot the Doc.
Yeah. So Marty's in this little storeroom or something.
Yeah.
Where he just crashed into an old cast iron stove, as you said, and he ended up trying to figure out how to get out of this mess.
Oh, yeah.
So as soon as Tannen says time's up and everything, he's about to point the gun to Doc's head and everything, and then Marty off in the distance comes walking around and says, "I'm right here, Tannen." So Marty and them start doing their standoff.
Oh yeah, it's your basic high noon standoff, middle of Main Street, another Western moment, if you will, which the two of them getting ready to fire. That's when Marty decides it's just not in him. It's not in his character.
Yeah. He takes the
undoes
gun belt off.
Drops it to the floor, to the dirt, and no sooner does that.
Well, he says, "I thought we can."
Settle like men. Yeah.
Tanner says, "You're wrong, dude." And he shoots him. So everybody thinks that Marty is.
Oh yeah. Well, it takes him up off his feet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what happens is that Tanner comes walking up to him, bowing and everything, all strutting and everything, and he kind of gets up over there to Marty and everything, and next Marty is alive and kicks the gun right out of his hand and everything, and then Tannen's surprised, and then he tries to punch him in the stomach, and then he cracks his hand, and then all of a sudden you hear this boom noise, and then Marty flips over his poncho and everything to reveal that he did a classic.
Classic Western, a classic move in any sort of standoff situation.
Well, what it was
makeshift armor.
Yeah, what happened was that Biff in part 2 was in a hot tub with two lovely ladies watching. Which one was this? I think it was the second Man with No Name.
Yeah.
I think it was the second Man with No Name movie and everything. A few dollars. I think it was either a fistful of dollars or a few dollars more. But Clint Eastwood had done something like that where he had pieces of metal and everything to block the bullets and everything. And Marty did the same thing, which that foreshadowed what Marty was going to do. Yeah. So Marty kept that in his mind of what to do. So Marty just stands there while Biff's like holding his hand and he's about to go after him. Marty takes the thing off and slaps Biff in the face with it, drops it, and then starts decking Biff and everything. And then the final blow, he punches him. And he crashes into the tombstone, and then he gets back up. Yep, and he gets back up, staggers and everything, and Marty throws one more big punch, and he turns around. Biff does, or not Biff, but Tannen, and falls into more manure. So what happens?
Fresh pile of that.
Yeah. So yeah. But what happens is that Doc's like, "Look at the tombstone," and then they look at the picture, and they're like, "Yes, it's over," And they hear the train horn and everything. They're like, "Can we make it? We're gonna have to, do the old typical Western. I'm gonna cut them off at Coyote Pass." So what happens is that, when they pick up Tannen out of that manure, and the deputy's like, "You're guilty for the Pine City, robbing the Pine City stage."
Yeah.
And the original, it was a deleted scene, but originally what it was supposed to be is that he shot Marshall Strickland.
Yeah.
But, they decided to take that out because they didn't want nobody dying in the Back to the Future movies or stay dead. So what happened was that, he's like, he spits out a thing of manure and says, "Manure. I hate manure." And when Doc and Marty get on their horses and everything, Marty sees Seamus and everything, looks at the gun, throws it to Seamus and everything, his ancestor, and he says, "It's worth $12, never been used."
Find yourself a new
Yeah, and take care of that baby. It's a typical Western thing. The little kid hands Marty his gun and everything. "Hey, Mr. Eastwood, you forgot your gun." Typical, traditional Western.
It was basically a staple all through the movie. Like I said, I think it was a nod to the westerns that came before. But after that, you get the classic train chase scene.
Yeah.
The horses running for the train. By now we've got Claire realizing that.
Yeah, that's another thing we almost forgot and everything. She was on a train where she was
talking to the barbed wire salesman that he was that Christopher was going to.
Yeah, because she was overhearing the story.
Yeah, talking to him in the saloon.
Sit down over there. So, you want to sit here? Okay. But what happened was, she stops the train.
Yeah.
And that always something that always made me scared about going on a train. Somebody having free access to the brake.
Yeah, that might be a little worrisome.
Yeah. But they end up she comes by and everything and notices, goes back to Doc's lab and everything and sees that the little getup that he had made, just similar to the first Back to the Future. And she looks at this thing that he made, this makeshift time machine model, and she gets on a horse and goes after him and everything. So at that time, Doc and Marty is getting on the train and everything, climbing the train. Classic train
scene from the Old West. Any Old West where you see train robbery, whatnot. You had them riding up on horseback, climbing onto the train, walking across the top of the cars to get to the engine.
Yeah. So it was. I mean, it was very well done.
Probably one of the best action scenes in the whole movie.
Yeah.
It was just a really good scene, a lot of action and whatnot, especially with Clara riding up to the side of the train.
Yeah, I mean, because I like it when Doc and Marty get into the engineer and everything.
Yeah. They're
like, "Stick it up," and they're like, "Is this a hold up?" And they're like, "No, it's a science experiment." And then so they, stop the train.
Of course, with the classic bandana.
Yeah. So when they move the train track and everything, they fix it to where the train goes off, and then they've got the train ready to build up against the DeLorean. They got everything set up, and they start going. Clara notices that everything's been stopped, and she hears the train blowing off in the distance, and she follows after him. So, and then while the DeLorean and the train are speeding up everything, you see Clara coming off. Marty's already in the DeLorean. Doc's ready to get out there and everything. Yeah, they used pressure logs to make the train go faster. So each time, it hits a certain colored level, it accelerates faster.
One was green, two was yellow, three was red.
Yeah. So then finally, when it hit a certain acceleration and everything, she finally grabs a hold of the train and it's dragging her. She's like
jerk. She's holding on to the side of the train.
Yeah.
Doc Brown, of course, is trying to help her while trying to get the train up to speed.
Well, what happens is that he gets out and everything.
Yeah.
And he doesn't hear her. He thinks he hears something, but then he climbs out on the side of the train.
Yeah.
And she's still trying to get on top of the train, and she finally gets onto the wood.
Yeah, she's hanging on to the back of it at the time.
Well, no, she gets in there. What she calls him when she's in the train, inside the engine, in the engine part. Yeah. He's like right there in the front. But and then of course, when she finally gets his attention by blowing the horn.
Yeah.
And they're trying to figure out what the hell's going on and everything. And he realizes she's in there and she's wanting to sacrifice everything to be with him. And the look on Doc's face, she's like when she says, "I love you."
Yeah.
And it just like in the music and everything, Alex Silvestri scored everything because he's got the Old West mixed with the Back to the Future traditional theme and everything, just mixed well. It was like one of those really well done scenes that happens and everything. You have to mind me and everything. My daughter likes to eat. So, but so what happened was that he's like, "It's Clara," and Doc, we're passing the windmill, which was the point of no return for him. They're like, "Well, we're just gonna have to bring her back with us." So, this whole time, he's trying to get her to come out, and every time, she gets out and everything, and right when they're about to touch hands, the red log blows, and the train just like, just everything popping off and everything.
Goes to speed, jostles the whole train.
She's thrown off, and she's only hanging by the threads of her dress and upside down. So, and I can remember Marty, was like finally, trying to realize what's going on, and the DeLorean's getting up on its high wheels and everything being pushed, and everything's like smoke and stuff is just spitting out and bullet, like the little nuts and everything are spitting out like bullets. And then Doc's, trying to hold on the best he can, and then Marty finally realizes the hoverboard comes up to him. He's like, Doc, I'm going to hand you the hoverboard. And he throws it off to him and everything. And Marty, with luck and everything, catches it with his boot and everything. And he glides over and catches Claire and everything before she falls, and they float away.
Yeah.
And Marty's just, happy to see his friend, and they're in love, happy, and they float away off into a field. I can remember my mom saying, like, my mom, she was a fan of this movie too. But she's like, he came out all that way and everything. Now he's staying in 1885. He's supposed to come back and bring her back to the future. I can remember hearing my mom off in the distance.
It was kind of, good for Doc. I mean, that was the time period he wanted to be in.
Yeah.
It was the girl he wanted to be with. It was kind of just the perfect way for it to end for Doc.
Yeah. And then finally, Marty's like realizing it's time to close the door and puts his cowboy hat on and everything. He gets ready, being the true being a true cowboy to take it, and then getting close to that big sign and everything that says track closed and everything. And I have to say, this was probably the coolest scene out of it and everything. Seeing from a long shot and everything, because they made a half scale model of the train. They made a half scale model of the train, and what happened was that he ended up you see the DeLorean, the flash and everything, and the track and leaving the fire tracks all into the air basically, and then the train, that model train and everything, they actually had it crash for the half scale model and everything crashed into the ground.
Yeah.
And it wasn't a fool's train, but it was a half train, and it was a very spectacular explosion and everything. It was probably one of the coolest. It was a practical effect. It was not CGI or anything. It was a model effect and everything, and real explosions and stuff like that. Something you don't really see. Something rarely seen anymore nowadays, and it was really detailed. And I absolutely loved that scene. That was my favorite scene with the time travel.
It was hard to tell that it wasn't the real train.
Yeah, a lot of people thought it was.
Yeah. It definitely.
I can remember my dad. I can remember my dad because my dad was a train enthusiast. My dad used to drive trains at one of his jobs, and he's like, "Man, that's a fine waste of beautiful machinery." And so what happened was Marty goes back into the future.
Of course, the bridge is completed.
Yeah, and instead of saying Clayton Ravine, it says Eastwood Ravine.
Yeah.
So basically, off camera and everything, what happened was that they said that Clint Eastwood died trying to save the train and everything, and they named it out. We're back. Boy, the time dispersal and everything. Just back and forth and everything.
Yeah.
I mean, we're dealing with a nice little mess and everything of spilled cereal. Thank you, Ocean. So, let's say Marty. Yeah. So, Marty, he's back in 1985.
Yeah.
And then the DeLorean's driving past the tracks. And then all of a sudden, he sees all the other cars on the other sides of the tracks looking at him, sticking their heads out the window, figuring out what's going on. And then finally, the DeLorean stops, dead in its tracks.
Right at a railroad crossing.
Yeah, and then he turns to look, and there's a train on his way.
Oh, yeah.
So he's shocked and sees what happens and everything. He's trying to struggle to open the door. And what happens and everything, he finally opens it at the split second, and the DeLorean gets destroyed by this train. And I can remember my brother and I sitting by each other and everything, looking at each other like, man, we know this is the end. I mean, it was the end of the DeLorean, and this was the end of that story. Meaning that, this is their way of saying, there's not going to be another Back to the Future 4. So that was just, it was a little heartbreaking, and they did a little thing where the license plate spun around like they did in the original one when Doc first tested it. Yeah, so it was a sad moment for the series.
Yeah.
To know that this was its way of saying this is it. So Marty looks at it and he looks at the flux capacitor and the time circuits. You know, they're all
All
destroyed.
destroyed and busted up.
And then he goes, "Well,
you can,
Doc."
You can kind of see him just deflate. You know, he knows it's the end of an era. Okay.
So he knows that. Yeah, he knows that there's no way he can go back now and save Doc.
Yeah. But
so,
you know, he accepts it. It seems,
yeah.
You know, and he knows the Doc's where he wants to be.
Yeah. And he knows that that's where
yeah.
You know, he knows that that's what Doc wanted. He wanted to destroy it.
Oh yeah.
So what happens is that he then walks back to his house. He runs back to his house and everything, where he sees the truck and everything. Everything's back to normal. He sees that his family's coming out. And we're like, you wore that to the lake because he's still in his Western outfit.
Yeah.
And then Biff's like, you know, he takes the, you know, he goes take the stuff off the thing. And Biff's like, hey, watch it, bud. And he's like, watch it, Biff. Marty, yo.
Yeah.
So everything's back to normal the way it was at the end of part 2 or part 1. So and then you know, he gets into the truck and everything. He says, I gotta go find Jennifer. And Biff's like, I really like that hat, Marty. And so
again, it's the instance of, you know, Biff taking on the personality traits of the beginning of George McFly's character in the original. You know, the timid, quiet, suck up kind of
thing. Exactly. And that was it was really a, you know, pivotal moment and everything when he finally drives up to Jennifer's home.
Yeah.
And you know, he wakes her up and he kisses her, which you know, something they hadn't been able to do in the last few movies and everything. Every time he goes to try to kiss her, something happens.
She doesn't even show up in the beginning of the third movie. She's knocked out for the majority of the second movie.
Yeah.
You know, the first movie she's introduced as a character, but she's not a you know, character in the time traveling sense.
Yes.
So you know, you kind of just see a lot of missed opportunity with it. I like the fact that it was addressed in the final, you know, in the final film.
Yeah.
The fact that it was kind of showing a moving on of sorts.
Yeah, you know, she wakes up, you know, they kiss, and then she's like, I've had the worst dream.
Yeah.
And then they go up to
which is a reference to part 2.
Yeah. So she gets up to they get up to Hilldale, and he's like, Hilldale. Marty's like, this is where we're gonna live. I mean, someday. She goes,
yeah.
This was a dream, wasn't it? You know, she starts explaining to him, you know, her dream she had that he got fired from his job, and you know,
which is the first Marty's hearing about any of it.
Yeah.
You know, it was an experience shared, you know, knowledge-wise by Dr. Emmett Brown, and experience-wise by Jennifer, being stuck in the closet in part 2.
Yeah.
You know.
So, but then what happens is that Needles, a younger Needles, and his gang come pulling up in a bigger pickup truck. And the thing that you'll notice and everything, certain members of Needles' gang were all plucked from other members of Biff's gang.
Yeah.
From part 1, which you, I believe you see, I don't know, which one was it? I think the guy who,
the 3D shades.
No, Casey Shimako and it was one of the guys that was in the Western gang.
Yeah.
One of the guys who was in the Future gang.
Yeah.
And another guy who was, I believe he was the other one with the shaved head and everything.
Yeah, I know you're talking about.
That was in Biff's 1955 gang. So, you know, that was a nice little.
Yeah, kind of a bringing together, you know.
Which kind of makes you think that Needles could have been Biff's son or something, or offspring.
I don't know about son. I mean, Biff in 1985, you know, I could see maybe it being like an homage to the fact that he's kind of the villain of the future, and the fact of through his act that he's perpetrating now in 1985 kind of causes Marty's, you know, problems and downfall in 2015.
Yeah, but obviously a lot of people still think that he was still related to Biff in some way somehow.
He might have been, you know, they never really addressed it.
Yeah.
But you know, I like to toil a little bit with, you know, philosophical thinking. I think it was just a good way for them to show, without showing Biff Tannen, who's already appearing in 1985 as kind of a beaten down, you know, wimpy guy, but a good way to show pieces of his gang throughout the movie, you know, posing as, you know, kind of the villains, if you will, of the movie franchise. And then, Needles, of course, being the downfall of Marty McFly at that period of time, which they come to find out.
Oh yeah.
I think it was just it was a nice way to have that show up.
Yeah, I think it was really funny that when Marty's being challenged by Needles to go for a race, and he's like, "What do you get, chicken?" So what happens is that he gets everything readied up and everything. He starts, look like he's about to race, and they start revving up their engines and everything. And then, it's funny seeing a Ford and a Toyota kind of going.
Yeah, that was interesting.
Yeah.
I was waiting for the Chevy to show up and just blow them both away.
Yeah. But next they rev up and Needles goes forward and then Marty throws it in reverse and everything.
Yep.
And he spins it around and everything. She's like, "Did you do that on purpose? Because you think I'm stupid enough to race that idiot?"
Yeah.
And next you see Needles and his gang and everything driving up, and there's Royce comes pulling out, and they almost hit it, and Marty would have hit it, and they mentioned that in the Back to the Future Part 2.
Yeah.
So it's
they address it as what actually kills Marty's music career.
Yeah.
The fact that the Rolls Royce hits his Toyota, messes up his hand. You actually see a scene in Back to the Future 2 where he goes to play his guitar.
Mm-hmm.
You see him trying to flex his hand to get some mobility back into it so he can play. But just overall, that was a turning point, I think, for Marty. The experiences he had while traveling with Doc Brown. He's learned not to be easily provoked by being called a chicken, being called yellow in Part 3. I think it really showed in Part 3, I think it just showed an overall character evolution, not only for Doc Brown accepting that, you can be part of a time and still be part of your time.
Yeah.
He kind of became more, daring, more brave, more interested in trying out, what he could do in a time.
Yeah, and then, when they turned around, when they realized, Jennifer realized that he couldn't get that, she opens up that piece of paper that she got from the future, and it said, "You're fired," and that disappears.
For some reason, there was fax machines in 2015. They were really into that part.
That much, it's hardly anybody that uses fax.
I don't think I've seen a fax machine in probably 5 years. Probably more. Especially in a home setting.
Yeah, but and then Marty finally realizes that he has to tell the truth, so they go back to the wreckage of the DeLorean at the train tracks, and while he's rummaging through, the stuff and everything, he sees a picture of Doc.
Yeah.
The picture that he took from 1955.
The two of them from the clock.
Well, actually, originally it was just Doc.
Yeah.
But the thing is, that raises the question. When they took that picture, now Marty's supposed to be on that other side.
Yeah.
Broken in half. So, you never know. You may never know.
Yeah.
But they were just rummaging through, and he says the Doc's never coming back. And next thing you know, they start seeing the track rails coming down and everything, and they're looking back, and there's nothing coming. And then there's a huge explosion that throws them backwards and everything. And lo and behold, there's a train that Doc has turned into a time machine.
Oh yeah.
And what they called it, what the train is nicknamed, the Jules Verne time machine.
Yeah.
So it was pretty sweet looking.
It was. It was very interesting looking. It brought the Old West, with the future tinge to it. It was really cool. And just the shock of knowing that Doc Brown, the whole problem in 1955 was they had nothing to work with to build a time machine, and to think that in 1885,
he runs on the scene.
Yeah, he turns around and makes it, a new, completely different way.
Yeah.
I mean, that was just really exciting.
So what he does is that he came there to, let one to pick up Einstein.
Oh yeah.
And two, to let Marty know that everything's okay.
Yeah.
And that, they go, and he had brought him a present. He introduces his kids, Jules and Vern.
Yeah.
So, and him and that, of course, Clara are married.
Oh yeah.
And that, he hands Marty a gift and everything, and there's a picture of them at the clock, clock that they took. So, they were, Doc gives them the message, your future's not been written yet.
Oh, yeah.
No one has, so make it a good one.
As he did a trailer here a little while
on YouTube,
that has been posted up on YouTube as well as on Facebook all over the place.
Yeah.
For Back to the Future Day, he uses that quote from Part 3 to actually, give a message to the people of 2015, you know, the future didn't turn out the way we thought it would, kind of deal. You
Yeah.
know? But I like that he did that for Back to the Future.
Yeah.
It was a really good scene in part 3. You know?
Yeah. And then, you know, and then he says, you know, stand back because, you know,
Oh,
he's
yeah.
getting everything ready up. And then Marty says, what do you do now? Go back to the future? And when he says simply, he goes, nope, already been there. And he closes everything up. And then next you know, it's just long shot and everything.
Oh, yeah.
And the train wheels are folding up and everything.
Very reminiscent of the ending of the original,
exactly, just
which
like
was
that.
what I like. You know, you see the train's wheels fold up under
Yeah.
it. You see, and the part I liked about it was the Jules Verne spin on it, the wings kind of coming off the side of it. You know, that was what sold it for me.
Yeah, and I liked it when it turned around.
Oh, yeah.
And it had the back and everything looked like rocket propulsion, so everything it shoots off and turns around, and you hear the theme song, and then you hear the train going, blowing the whistle and everything, and going right up to the camera and shooting off and blasting, and then it goes the end. Instead of being continued, to be continued, to be concluded, it says the end, which is telling everybody this was it.
Right.
And
but you know, you do have those people that mention, you know, he still has a time machine. He's still Doc Brown.
Yeah.
I like the fact that they made it, you know, conclusive. The end.
Yeah. But what it took place though is that I can remember, you know, after that, you know, the ZZ Top song, you know, Double Back, you know, which you know they were kind of, you know, that highlighted song in there. They actually had cameo in the movie and everything as you know guys playing the music and everything. You can see where you know after Marshall ran everybody off, you know they twirled their drums and guitars and everything, and you know, and Marty kind of looked over cockeyed like, you know. But again, you know, the trilogy was over, but like a year later, you know, around that time, Universal Studios had opened up, and it was not doing very well. And then about a year after it had opened and everything, they finally got the Back to the Future ride.
Yeah.
Opened up around 1991.
And it ran for a long time.
Yeah, that ride.
Oh yeah, that ride was very popular.
I can remember
the first time I went to that ride, the line was, you know, out the door.
And even had the train displayed out.
Oh yeah, they had
the
train. They had multiple movie props. The premise of it was interesting. You know, young Biff had stolen the DeLorean. You know,
and
you were all time officers. You know, you had to get into this secondary DeLorean.
The 8-passenger DeLorean.
Oh yeah.
So, but yeah,
I can remember getting into that, and being a taller person or a bigger person, you better sit in the middle. Otherwise, if you're in the back, you're cracking your head on the side panels.
Yeah.
But you know, it was such a good ride.
It was very realistic.
Yeah,
it was
didn't mind that.
Second simulation.
Yeah.
And I was in before that was Star Tours.
Yeah.
At Disney MGM, which is now Disney Hollywood. But yeah, it was, you know, now, you know, that was the best simulated ride back to the future. It was the best rides I've ever been on in my entire life.
The fact that it actually had Christopher Lloyd, you know, in the video, Wilson, you know, Thomas F. Wilson playing Biff, you know, it really sold it to me.
Yeah, and, and the ride, you know, the first time I got to go to Universal was back in 2001, just maybe 6 months after 9/11 had happened. So nobody was really traveling, and I got to go to, you know, Universal for the very first time. And my first destination was the Back to the Future ride, and I rode that ride no more than maybe 6 or 7 times in a row. I was able to get on it and off of it, right back and forth. I took a picture of the DeLorean that they had displayed there. Got to go around the Back to the Future shop. I even got Johnny Lightning Back to the Future DeLorean car, which, you know, I still have to this day. And I, you know, cherish that because, you know, that was a birthday present, or Christmas present to go there because I had been wanting to go for so long. And I got to, and it was a really fun ride. Yeah. And then just like maybe 6 years ago or so, they canceled the ride.
Yeah, just about. They replaced it with The Simpsons.
Yeah. And which makes no sense because they knew that this date, 2015.
I don't know that they expected the hype.
Yeah.
You know, I think that, you know, at the time, the ride had lost some popularity. You know, the novelty was kind of off. You got a new generation coming in with the, you know,
I think now they're probably learn that, you know, they're probably.
Well, they're going to learn that their patience, you know, their patience should have been a little bit, you know, more withstanding.
Yeah, because I mean now, you know, because one reason why the show was delayed.
Yeah.
Because everybody was on the internet because of Back to the Future. So
there was a bunch of people posting for Back to the Future Day. You know,
yeah,
a bunch of promotions running for Back to the Future Day. You know, it really. It was really something to see. And
yeah,
I don't know that anybody could have really anticipated how much
yeah.
hype there was, you know.
So, but yeah, it was just absolutely mind-blowing
Oh yeah.
how many people were on there. I was, like I said, I was excited for it. I was happy to be able to do this show on Back to the Future Day. It was something I had been waiting for 20 years. Sadly, my brother could not be here to enjoy it with me because we were actually going to think about doing a road trip and everything.
Oh, there you go.
So, but again,
you'd have to have one of the white fright wigs though, and be able to walk into places
yeah.
around the place.
So, in conclusion, when it comes to the Back to the Future trilogy, I think, as I said, this is my favorite trilogy of all time. This was my favorite film of all time. I have so many fond memories watching this movie and watching watching my youngest brother uh, reenacting the scene at the clock tower. As I said, I really would have loved to have my brother here had lived to see this day and everything because that road trip would have been kind of interesting.
Oh yeah.
But as I said, that we were going to sit and we probably would have watched it in the freaking theater, if we found a place for it. But again, watch all the stuff on YouTube other than this too and everything. Please like and subscribe.
It's not only a piece of just cinematic history.
Yeah.
It's permeated so many forms of media from it has
it's a cultural icon.
It is.
It's had like the Back to the Future game, Back to the Future game,
Part
1 and 2, the ride, a lot of stuff.
There's references to it in multiple movies. Not just from the same genre, but even from different genres.
Yeah, the music. People, will mumble to themselves.
Yeah, there you go.
And as I said, there's just so much. Funko last year and everything came out with Back to the Future retro style figures. That look like old Kenner figures back in the '80s. And it's just everything about this I've just loved and everything. And everything finally is coming about, 20 years later, 25 years later, 30 years later. People are starting making more. Universal's getting, like we got to make more spin-off merchandise for it. So, who knows? Maybe we'll get some retro, some Mego style Back to the Future figures. Which I love because I love Mego figures. But again, Back to the Future 3 was, the turning, was the end of the series, but there's the legacy lived on and everything. So.
And if you're, interested in the trilogy, you definitely want to check out Back in Time, the new documentary coming out.
It's coming in the 30th anniversary edition.
Oh yeah, it's got a bunch of deleted scenes, and all that. A lot of good information.
Yeah. So as I said, please like and subscribe to this channel. Like this video. Comment on below. And don't forget about the quiz that we got on there and everything.
Oh yeah.
Remember,
we look forward to the answers.
Yes. Go to WilliamBaxterExperience@gmail.com. If you want to, you can play that over and over again to try to get to look at the questions and give us the answers and everything. Please, like this video, support this channel. As I said, we are really getting up there in numbers, and we really would love to have your support and everything. And remember, my birthday.
Plugging it hard.
Yes.
But another good thing they should do with the quiz, you might want to check out these 3 reviews. Maybe they got the answers in them right there.
Watch the movies.
Watch the movies.
So, but again, thank you for watching. Thank you for being patient and everything.
Oh yes, thank you for that.
So, Paul really works his butt off and everything to get these videos up.
I got plenty there.
Yeah.
I got plenty there.
Yeah, you got plenty of work.
Yeah.
So, but next week, the Halloween franchise review.
Yep.
That'll lead up to Halloween Eve, or the day, 2 days before Halloween. And then I'm going to be going to Universal Halloween Horror Nights 25. So this will be the first time I've ever gone to Halloween Horror Nights.
Yeah. And it should be a good one. They're featuring The Walking Dead, Freddy vs. Jason.
That's the one I'm really looking forward to. Gives me a chance to wear my Freddy vs. Jason.
We actually mentioned it in our the Friday the 13th franchise review.
Yeah. So, but if you can, please, when that comes up and everything, please watch that.
Oh yeah.
And again, we appreciate you guys watching. As I said, when I looked on my Google account and everything, we were almost to 900 views just through Google alone.
Oh yeah.
And when it comes to the YouTube channel, it's like 635 right at outstanding the last time I looked. So the numbers are up there. The numbers are strong. And please, please like these videos. Go back to these videos, all the videos that I have done from Ocala Comic Con to now and everything, and like these videos and everything. Please like these videos because we really enjoy doing, bringing you this type of material. And we're going to bring you more. We're going to bring you a variety of different things and everything. And I hope to, have up some new shows here pretty soon and everything. Retro review show. Tuesday Extra, which movie alert every Tuesday Extra. You gotta watch the first episode of Tuesday Extra with my kids. Especially Ocean opening her very first Star Wars toy, which was very, that was a big moment for me.
That's a big formal moment.
Yeah. So, but again, watch these channels, and when it comes to that review show, we're going to be expanding that review show more than just reviewing movies and everything. We're going to be reviewing local businesses and everything in the county. And that is a big thing that I really like to push and everything. So, when it comes to local businesses and mom and pop businesses, to really help them out and give them a spotlight. So, so look forward for that and everything. Again, thank you. I'm William Baxter.
And I'm Paul Bell.
And this has been that Retro Review Show. And this had been Back to the Future Day. Now you consider it the past. It's over. It's said with. Now, when it comes to the running game, we got to worry about 2017.
Oh, that's going to be a worrisome day.
So that's going to be kind of scary because if y'all seen the running game, we have to do a review on that. That's just 2 years away. Maybe we're doing this and everything. Still, we'll do a review of Running Man.
Yep.
So, well, I'll see you later and take care.
Take it easy.
Happy Back to the Future Day, folks.